to start with. Awesome. Better than the last team score. That's always good. Not one enough. Is that better? Yeah. Oh, wow, excellent. Good old mics. Yeah, so I'm Andy.
I'm Kate.
We're from Shelter. We're here to basically talk about AI, but more importantly, the people who are using AI in conjunction with our services. So let's talk to you a bit about who we are. We're both content designers for Shelter. We're not actually here on behalf of Shelter, we're here as individuals, we're mates as well, outside of work, if we can.
Yeah, we put it that way, yes.
Yeah, okay, we'll put it that way. Yeah, we write housing advice for the public, and basically, as part of our roles as content designers, we also incorporate user research, we do data analysis, and we do things like service design as well. It's quite a blended discipline at Shelter with the way that we work. And yeah, today we're going to talk to you about...
He's actually my manager, but he calls himself my handler. It's very amusing. Anyway, yeah, so we're going to talk right, we're going to talk today about the context that's Shelter Advice Services. So we have an online service we designed the web content for, and we have Helpline, which people probably know about. It's emergency helpline if you've got really serious housing issues, which a lot of people do. And so we're going to talk about that and the impact that this has had on our one-to-one advice services, because people are ringing up a lot now saying ChatGPT said or that kind of thing. And the future, yeah, which could be very positive. So that's cool. What do I do next? Space. Thank you. Say that.
Okay, so why are we talking about this? We're not experts on AI, we're not going to pretend to be. We know how to use AI, we know how to design for AI. We can make sure that our results are in Gen AI engines. We can also make sure that they appear in GEO, so we can make sure that AI is picking up the advice that we're putting online. But we're here because we know our users really well. Our users are pretty stable. We know what they like. We know what they do. Did you say I call you?
Yeah.
What? I'm not your handler. That's not true at all. Yeah, so we know our users. They're pretty stable. Yeah. We do a lot of research into the kind of things they do, the kind of ways they reach the website, the kind of needs they have when they get there as well. So let's talk a bit about our users. As you might expect, the people with housing issues, any kind of housing issues can use the Shelter website. So whether that's because they've got disrepair in the property, damp and mould, they might be being evicted, may have rent or mortgage problems, that sort of stuff. And as you might imagine, that kind of user base is often dealing with a lot of stress, often trauma. We have people who are fleeing domestic violence, use the site often. So we've got a lot of people in very, very difficult situations. They've got complex needs, partly because of their circumstances, but also because we've got a really diverse user base. So some people are neurodivergent, some people are disabled. Even if they kind of don't have any accessibility issues, which many of our users do, they're in complex situations as well. So when someone has a housing problem, let's say they're being evicted for rent arrears, there's probably also a disrepair issue there as well. So maybe they're in arrears because the house is in disrepair, they're spending extra on heating to try and stop the damp and mould. So they may come to us about eviction, but then suddenly financial issues become a big part of this as well. And there's also time pressure too. As you can imagine, if somebody's got the bailiffs coming tomorrow, they're in a situation where they don't want to spend 4 hours rooting through your website for the appropriate advice. They need the advice right there and then. So let's talk about how we respond to that.
Okay. So yeah, we can talk about. We did just very quickly, because I don't think this is hugely interesting, but a lot of pages, covers most aspects of housing issues, and you're right, and we have a real focus on actions and also what to do if you can't get the right result. So a lot of problems with people going to councils for help, because councils are the bodies that are supposed to support people in homelessness and that. That's not how it works. So we have to show people and talk a lot about fighting, that kind of thing, and so we have a lot of self-help content as well. So it's not just about sort of helping people digest their actual housing rights, it's about helping people live in the real world where, not a welcoming environment from people who are supposed to be helping them, or at least organisations. So it's next up. Yep, so we can just do a quick one. Online content, that just follows basic design, user-led. It's all about what the user needs. Simple, plain English, legally accurate, obviously, of course. Full of actions that people can take. Yeah, move on to the next one.
And we complement the online advice with one-to-one advice services, and this is a part of what we're talking about as well today, because we try and design systems where people have got holistic support. So if they can't get help from online, then they can go and speak to an advisor or go on web chat and get help there too. So we've got three main public services. We've got a national helpline that deals mainly with emergency cases where people are at risk of homelessness within the next kind of maybe 6 weeks or so, something like that. We've got web chat, which operates on a similar basis, but obviously is online only. We've got hubs as well that offer face-to-face, one-to-one services. We've also got professional services as well who help too. And they are the Expert Housing Advice Service, who give advice to people like Citizens Advice, to other charities, to councils, about pretty much any housing issue. And we've also got the Specialist Step Advice Service that advises professionals on debt. So we try and make sure we've got kind of holistic support for anybody who needs help. And we flow through a system. We've got kind of a theoretical model for how we want that support to work. So we start off, let's just say, we'll call them Helpline Henry, shall we? Your random persona. Random persona. Helpline Henry has got a housing problem. He wants to know what he can do with it. He goes on Google, he searches, how can I deal with my landlord? Our pages generally rank pretty well. Again, designed for SEO, so Helpline Henry will find, hopefully, the appropriate advice. He'll enter our ecosystem via the advice pages. Hopefully, he can self-help, and hopefully he can get the information he needs from our pages and go off and deal with his landlord, and he's fine. If he's got more issues, he can go to a one-to-one advice service. So either he calls Helpline or he goes to his local hub, and they can give him additional support. But what we tend to find is we've got lots of repeat users. So people who've been to our website once are more likely to come back again. And people who've been to our advice services once are quite likely to come back again. And this isn't just because they have problems kind of with the same issue, but they'll come back again years afterwards with other issues. And they would have kind of had a good experience the first time round. But once you've got them in your ecosystem, then you develop a relationship with them. You can start sending them information about your organisation. They may come back and volunteer for you. You build up this kind of relationship where everybody's working together to the same end. And that kind of sets the stage for when we started doing some user testing. So, yeah, Kate started doing some work 18 months ago. And over the last kind of 18 months, we started developing...
Something like that. I'm talking to people more about it,
Yeah, we started working on how AI is affecting these things.
Okay. Just want to say also that previous little graph we showed you about the standard advice journey, that's a very romantic view. People usually fall down flat on the first one. As you'll know, housing is dreadful. It's not just here, it's New Zealand as well. If I can be disloyal to the home country, you run up against dreadful landlords, repair that's unreal, water coming down the floor, there's mould you can just scoop off like this. Kids living in horrible situations, councils just massively under-resourced, it's almost not worth talking about, and a real obstacle course, and people often have issues because their wages aren't high, all the rest of it. So that's the way the previous graph that you'd like it to be, but actually it's a lot harder. But we wanted to test because how people were searching, because the Renters' Rights Act was coming along, which was implemented last Friday. So a whole lot of new rights, a whole lot of new legislation around housing. We had these call-outs on the site last year just to see, taking people to this is what's coming, seeing how people used it. But what we noticed really, aside from that, was the way that people were starting to rely on AI as their search result, and also how inaccurate that was. Then we did another test to actually look more specifically about the way that users on the site were using AI to get there and the accuracy, and then we recently did another one to just see what that search behaviour was like. You can see there how we're going through, but it was a bit of a shock because 6 or 8 months before on other tests people weren't using AI, but now we're about October last year and people were really starting to get into it and get results from ChatGPT in particular that were quite inaccurate. And people were saying, yeah, we check our results and all the rest of it, but not really. And you had more scepticism at that point, so that was sort of good. Yeah, AI itself, the results people got, it was old legislation because the Renters' Rights Act had been coming along under the Tories, kind of going nowhere for a long time, so that those results were returned. There were things saying like, there were rent caps and things, there were no such things, that sort of thing. And unknown sources, some really quite way out sources. AI Google Overview was better, but not hugely better. So that's just a few quotes that we took at the time. And hang on to all that, but if anyone wants to see these, we can give those to you. Second round, same sort of thing, these are the same sort of scenarios, and we gave that kind of scenario for people to sort of search on and see how people went along. Notice, particularly on this test, that a lot of people were starting to show a lot of faith in Reddit because they felt there was a user experience there. It's a regulating, self-regulating community, and as much as people feel that, or as much as users will correct other people and say, no, that didn't happen, yes, this did happen. So it is something that people do rely on, they do actually have some confidence in. So that was quite interesting. Still, people increasingly using AI and getting results that were inaccurate. I don't want to hang you up there too much. So just again there, what we did notice from this test, and this is the big issue probably for all of us in this room, people actually want to speak to a human being, and so they are looking for the nearest approximation to that, and increasingly that's ChatGPT. But we do have a situation, which might be a strange thing for someone in my role to say, where we're trying to replace what people need with digital, and I think that's been a long-standing issue. But when you've got a serious housing issue, you often have council tax issues, arrears, all sorts of other debt, that kind of thing, and you're not going to necessarily get that off a web page. But if you talk to ChatGPT, it sounds a lot better and a lot more optimistic, which sort of brings us to our round 3. The biggest problem we're having with AI now with people testing is people don't check sources anymore. Even when you do check sources, they don't necessarily marry up with the result you've got, which might be something that people are experiencing. And we're also finding AI is so positive. Like if people say, can I get a council house? It goes, yeah, mate, no worries, this sort of thing. Like you just stroll down at lunchtime and get one. And it really leaves people in a vulnerable position, because I can see people thinking things like, oh, I've got an eviction notice. I can leave in 2 weeks, that's cool, because I can probably get council housing or help from the council because I've got mental health issues, that kind of thing. Actually trying to convince a council that you should have priority need because you've got mental health issues is extraordinarily hard. And Andy's an advisor, he's an ex-advisor, and I work as a housing activist and work a lot with people. I don't think I've ever heard anyone getting priority need for mental health issues without a lawyer, without that kind of input. So AI was going, get in there, no worries, and it's just not where it's at. So that optimism, more than accuracy, is kind of the issue that we're dealing with. It doesn't set people up for the real world. Yeah, we can look through that. A lot of people using ChatGPT, one person now using the app and feeling very comfortable with it, feeling it was very personal, that they were getting a lot of good sort of chat back and forth. Yeah, I won't hang you up too much in case people want to have questions and at the end, and just some more quotes. One thing you might find interesting, a number of testers now are saying things like they're not so big on the big websites like ours or CAB or whatever because they feel it's really boilerplate. They want to have something personal, which is useful to know. Right, so Andy's going to talk about our services. Did I go on too long?
Yeah, so at the same time we were doing this work, our helpline and web chat were getting a bit hammered with AI-related queries. So we were kind of wondering, how is this impacting on our services and where do we go from here? And so we incorporated a bit more research with our advisors directly. And what we did basically was we had a few meetings with team leaders, we did some interviews with advisors and got them to send us through examples of where the kind of clients that they've been speaking to, where AI has impacted on the support they're getting. And we also sent out a survey to all our advice services. We got 31 responses, which is pretty decent given the number of advisors we've got across the organisation, just to get a sense of how is AI impacting on the actual advice that people are being given by human beings. And we saw a bit of a difference between the public services and the professional services. At the start there, we talked about the fact we've got 3 main national services for the public, we've got 2 main national services for professionals, and there was definitely a split between the 2 of them. And the impact on public services was much greater and much worse. It's a small impact at the moment, or at least it was when we did this study, which was a couple of months ago now, but it's increasing, and you can watch it increasing. So we've watched the number of people who've been referred to our website by AI increasing. Went up by about 400% last year. And so we can imagine, you know, applying that data to what's happening to our helplines and what's happening to web chat, that there's going to be a similar kind of increase in the number of people who've been influenced by AI before they come to us. Advisors told us that basically AI is making their jobs more difficult, and there's a number of reasons for this, which we'll get into in a second. But sometimes clients are bringing along full summaries of their situation, written by, say, ChatGPT, which might be 7 or 8 pages long, and the advisor then has to deal with that and get through that before they can actually start even finding out what the initial problem is that the client's presenting with. And some clients are insisting that AI is right, so they're arguing with the advisor and saying, no, what you're telling me is wrong because what I've got here is a nice, clear, straightforward answer, but you're telling me it's not as simple as that. So like Kate was saying, priority need is a really complex area of law. It's built up not just of legislation, but it's got loads of case law that goes into it. It's really, really brain-numbing in terms of how difficult it is to get into. So a simple answer is great, but it's often wrong, unfortunately. And even more alarmingly, we've seen that some people are making massive choices in their lives based specifically on what AI has told them and on an interaction that has pretty much happened only with AI. So just to really quickly run through what we've seen, 85% of our public advisors have said that they think AI has influenced some of their contact with clients. 26 or a quarter say that up to 10% of clients have used AI, and a third say that up to a quarter have used AI. About 10% say that more than a quarter have used AI. So it's relatively small numbers at the moment, but it's definitely growing. And the kind of things that people are using AI for, look for information to find out what the rights are, which you'd probably expect. They've been using it to generate content to support their case. So like Kate was saying, if someone says, I'm in priority need, then they get a letter to send to the council to say, I'm in priority need, this is the reason why. They've used it to summarise our website or the government's website, or even some of the advice that advisors have given them in writing. And they've used it to find out how to carry out specific tasks like applying for benefits or applying for social housing. One of the problems with AI is it's not very local, and so for applying for social housing is different wherever you are in the country. So if you get AI to tell you how to apply for social housing in Manchester, it's going to be totally different in Sheffield. So obviously there's some issues there. AI is making advisor jobs harder. So as we say, an advisor might have to start off with refuting what AI has told a client. At the very least, an advisor might have to kind of explain to a client how the AI response actually fits in with the real world. And it might take an hour to do that in some cases. So these are people who, they're already pressured for time. Advisors are massively pressured for time. Obviously, as a charity, we have limited resources. So we're finding people dealing with the AI responses is taking up time where they could just be doing advice to people and just speaking to another person who's in a difficult situation. About half of advisors, so that giving advice is more difficult, 7% on top of that are kind of saying, well, as long as my advice tallies with what AI tells them, it's okay. But if it doesn't tally, then we're in trouble as well. And 63% of advisors say that AI makes them feel less confident. So it makes them feel either worried about their jobs or worried about how their job's going to go, or just worried in general for the state of advice. A few quotes, I'm not going to read them all out, but basically they're talking about clients don't have base knowledge, so they can't challenge AI. AI is giving advice like, get a human rights lawyer. Yeah, the councils are pressing you. Go and get some proper support with this. Which sounds great when you're in that kind of position, you feel oppressed by a council. But the reality is the legislation that's there feels really oppressive. And so they're probably getting really good advice from the council, but they just don't like it, which is something we see all the time. And the last one, again, really worrying. Several clients who've got acute mental health issues who go to AI and say, hey, tell me about my situation. And AI is kind of reinforcing those mental health issues they're experiencing. And it's, if you're in a position where you're looking to get a human rights lawyer because you're being oppressed, and then you go onto AI and say, right, tell me more about how this oppression is working, then AI will affirmatively say, yeah, you're being oppressed, this is terrible, because it's programmed to kind of agree with what you're saying rather than enter into a discourse with you about it. And just the last slide on this, professionals, as we said, the impact was very different for them. And what we actually found was 3/4 of professionals, professional advisors, said that their clients hadn't used AI at all. They're still negative about AI though. 50% say that AI makes them less confident, and the other 50% don't know how they feel about it. And then 75% of those advisors have identified what they believe are the signs of AI, which includes basically making up case law, which we've seen in the news. There's been some quite high-profile court cases where AI has basically made up case law, and legislation taken out of context. So that, things like the human rights lawyer, there may be actual legislation that's based on, but the problem is it's not in the appropriate context. The reasoning we're thinking behind some of this is professionals tend to understand how complex housing law is. So your average user probably thinks housing law is quite simple. They probably think there's a law that says you can do this and you can't do that. But in actual fact, it's the gaps in between the law that often establish what your rights are. And that's something that's very, very difficult to program into AI. Whereas an advisor will know this from the fact they've been asked hundreds of questions about these things. Professionals are more likely to have experienced misinformation. So whether that's from, you make down the pub saying, yeah, you can withhold rent if you've got disrepair in your property. Professionals have heard that 1,000 times. They know that's not true. And they're more likely to kind of have alarm bells set off when there's something that doesn't seem right. There's also a habitual or procedural reliance on advice services. As the professional services we have at Shelter, people are calling them repeatedly. So we get hundreds of calls from councils, from citizen advice, often from the same advisors calling us again and again and again, and that develops relationships. So people know that Shelter will give them appropriate advice, and people know that they often know the individual advisors on the helplines that they're speaking to. So there's a relationship developed there, which just doesn't really happen with members of the public. Which brings us on to the future, which is kind of like, what could journeys look like, and maybe, why is that a problem, what can we do about it? So, again, very, very theoretical model for how the AI advice journey could work, but it kind of ties in a bit to what we've seen so far. Someone who wants help goes into ChatGPT, which we've seen people doing. AI gets loads of content from loads of different sources and responds to the user's question. And gives them this complete solution, which sounds great, and in theory it would be wonderful if it was actually the proper holistic response. The user acts on that. If they've got any problems, they can then go straight back on their phone, get AI to give them more information. So they could be in a council office saying, oh, what do I do next? Which obviously is a really, really convenient way of getting more, as they see it, progressing the situation. And then the problem there is also the user never actually encounters relevant services. So they never even get into that ecosystem where they can kind of say, talk to me about my situation, talk to me about what other things I need to know in my circumstances. So that person who's been evicted for rent arrears because they withheld rent because their house has got disrepair, they never actually have an advisor say to them, okay, so tell me more about your situation, tell me more about why these arrears have accrued, and then maybe look at getting them debt advice, or maybe look at applying for benefits, that kind of thing. AI just doesn't have the capacity to do that from what we've seen. And again, why is it a problem? Housing law is complex. Hopefully, you know that by now from what we've said. A tenant's rights depend greatly on context, so you give one bit of advice to a social tenant, it's totally different for a private tenant, and it's totally different again to someone who's lodging with somebody. Whereas people don't always know that that's the kind of prompt they need to put into AI. They don't always know that, I need to say that I'm an assured tenant and I've received a Section 8 notice with Ground 8. They might just say, I'm a tenant, what can I do in this situation? Which ties into users' prompts having this significant impact. So if a user puts in a massive long prompt that's got all the relevant information in it, they might get a decent response out of AI. But if they don't, there's a real risk that they're not getting the information they actually need. As we were saying, advice services ask around the problem. They can make sure that they're trying to deal with the problem holistically and get to the root of the cause, not just looking at the surface issues. And also housing is a really emotional topic for people. Yeah, as Kate said, I did quite a few years as an advisor, and probably every 1 in 3 calls is someone crying down the phone to you and getting really distraught about the situation. And so if you're an advisor, you can talk to someone, you can give them a bit of humanity, you can explain the situation to them, and you can explain bad news in kind of a responsible way. AI just puts it very straight to you. There's a nice sugarcoating on some of it, saying, oh no, I hear your problem. But you don't get that proper emotional support that you would from talking to a person. So, user journeys to a website.
What do we want to say about that? Well, generally, like everyone, the drop in the traffic has been noticeable, and that's potentially, will be because of AI, at least in part. Last one is one of my favourites. We've just done a year's worth of work to get the Renters' Right SAC content ready to go, hundreds of hours, would it be fair to say? When you get legislation, man, it's just like a watermelon that's been hit by a bus or something like that. It's all over the place, and you've got to try what ends what. It took ages, and we produced it on time, and hopefully it's there for people. And as soon as it goes out there, there's 300 plus pages, whatever it was. Google and ChatGPT, they just say, thanks, that's ours, like stealing, plagiarism. No, people don't come to the site anymore, and that I think is a real threat to organisations like this one, because you need people in the ecosystem, you need people sort of taking those journeys. Bit of a downward slide, and what to do about that. I mean, there's a lot of chat about working with AI, working with Google. I personally think it's a fantasy. I don't think they care if we all die, really. But one of the reasons I came here, I think, there's ways we've talked to other organisations about working together to sort of push back and say, you either need to pay us or you need to bugger off, whatever it is. One of the reasons I came here is I was thinking, this opportunity to raise an army. And it is putting people at risk of harm, especially because no numbers on this yet, but people who want a conversation are often, hate the word, but vulnerable. They are really on the bones, And so when they're having a chat, and people do say it's emotionally supportive, especially speaking to ChatGPT, they feel maybe that something's happening when the thing that should be happening is they're able to talk to someone, while places like Shelter put pressure on government to improve legislation, which has just happened, which is good. It did take a very long time, but there's still issues, lack of housing stock around the world, the whole thing. This is another one. We have people just put everything into ChatGPT, their name, their tenancy agreement, their bank details, the whole 9 yards, asking, is my tenancy agreement accurate? Is it missing this? It should have that. God knows what's that. I mean, these sites, they have these lovely statements about, we don't do anything with your information, but I can see a state where people can't get insurance or health care because people, that person's had a long history of sort of suicidal ideation or whatever it is. So people really do get personal, there was abuse, there was this, that and the other. And the other thing is users don't get the support they need to know about the traps in housing legislation. Things like, if you leave your house because you're being evicted for rent arrears because ChatGPT's told you, finding emergency housing should be fine because you've got mental health issues. If you actually leave your home, the council can just say to you, you made yourself intentionally homeless, farewell. And that means you can't get any sort of support. But ChatGPT doesn't surface that, and AI doesn't surface that. If you ring an advisor, they'll say, hang on, don't leave just as soon as you get the notice. You can stay a bit longer. Maybe it can help you find somewhere, if you know what I mean. So you're not, but if you turn up to a council and you've had rent arrears in that situation, that's just good night news for you. So, do we want to talk about risk, or should we just ask people if they want questions? Even though I'm sick of my own voice. So does anyone have any questions? We're happy to talk any further about all of it. Hello.
Is this information online somewhere?
We've got online somewhere. We've got
think, is it being shared through digital?
Slides?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Oh, possibly, yeah.
We'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah,
We'll get some details, we'll get into it, we'll have a chat and stuff.
yeah.
If that works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want something that I can point people to.
Yeah, that might be good actually, yeah. Definitely.
Yes, thank you.
Hello.
You said early on that you had found people would like to go into somewhere like Reddit to ask, ask people they knew or people in the forum for advice. And that's certainly my experience in the past when I've done that kind of research. But I wonder whether you think things like ChatGPT are taking on that role because it feels like your friendly personal assistant.
It's a good point actually, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people, or say a lot, the testing groups were small, but people using Reddit were making the comment that they felt that that was a better option than AI and ChatGPT, like because it's self-regulating as such. There was a more reliable train down there, but that could be a thing. I mean, for a while there, we were kind of feeling Reddit was a bit of a corrective, eh? Yeah, but things may have evolved. Things move so fast. The first test we did on this for October just feel like a million years ago, if you know what I mean. So it may be evolving that way because ChatGPT, as far as presentation and interaction goes, has really cleaned up its act in even 2 or 3 months. It's quite interesting. So that might be going the other way. I wouldn't be surprised if the likes of various AI platforms were actually targeting, if you like, Reddit. You know, like, we've got to be like them or something. Hello, do you want to talk? Because I'm just...
So shall they use any AI?
We hate it.
We hate it unless they're listening, in which case...
It was sort of different. I think internally some people probably are.
We use it, I mean, for our advice pages,
We don't.
none of it is AI. There's
No.
some stuff in the background, data processing, that kind of thing, where we'll bring in AI sometimes. We've got Copilot, yay.
We've got, yeah, but we're
Yeah,
just
we're
like, delete.
That's for entertainment, Joe.
We certainly don't use it to create content ourselves, but other parts of the organisation might. Marketing? I shouldn't don't the cheap and nothing.
Hi, yeah, I just wondered, like there's always been loads of misinformation online. There's
Yeah.
always been that, that's always existed. This feels obviously like much more threatening. And apart from the advisors saying best not to trust that information you've just got from ChatGPT, what can be done, I guess, like to sort of solve this issue? Not necessarily solve it, but stop people seeking information.
The slide view.
We've got a slide for you. Yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Remember the army thing as well.
I mean, it's really worth mentioning. We're going to mention this at the end, but it's something that's kind of worth mentioning now. If anyone from Scope is here, we've kind of joined a group that Scope put together with a group of folks called Content Club, mainly content designers, but we have like a monthly meeting about AI matters, and that's where kind of Kate and I started kind of talking more broadly about these matters. We heard a few days ago from the Patient Information Forum, and in terms of medical health or kind of medical advice, they call it the PIF tick, which is going to be something that hopefully will show that medical advice can be trusted. It was kind of tied into those Guardian articles about health advice being misleading and sometimes dangerous. At the moment, as far as I know, those initiatives are only really kind of relevant for the medical world, but Advice Now have started looking into this as well. So Advice Now kind of deal with, they provide advice themselves, but they kind of try and signpost to reputable organisations. They're looking at doing, hopefully, a similar kind of initiative. And I think we've heard today from quite a few people that, the power is in everybody. So it's up to kind of everybody collectively to start this kind of pushback movement, if we can, somehow. I've got a badge for the Society of Hopeful Technologists, so if anyone else has got that sort of badge, hopefully there's going to be some movement there. From what we've heard, government isn't massively bothered about moving things forward. The AI organisations obviously aren't that bothered about moving things forward. So it is going to be a case of us trying to work collectively and come together. So
But
that's where we're at.
there is a moment for that, and I just think
Yeah.
also, like, as you know, big tech, these people are not pleasant. They need lawyers, they need abuse, they need constant getting at, and that's sort of the way to go. There are discussions about just having chats with them, and there has been apparently a bit of movement after a few Guardian articles on health misinformation, which people probably saw. So that's okay, but yeah, I mean, you probably have to get quite violent about it. I mean, I just been strong gracefully.
That's the being a one-to-one.
In terms of people with kind of like housing issues, are you seeing them come into the journey later, and how will you kind of approach that? So, in terms of them coming to shelter, are they coming to you later? How's that impacting your like work and advice?
That's a really good question, and that is kind of something that Shelter's been dealing with for a long time. And the main problem here is capacity. So for the website, great, anyone can get to any page whenever they want to. But what Helpline Web Chat did a few years ago was to move to an emergency service. So it started off giving advice on anything about housing. Because of the demand, it's now only dealing with people who are at risk of homelessness.
Immediately, isn't it?
Yeah, really soon, basically. So it's very difficult to say because we don't get an idea for the demand of people who aren't in an emergency situation. We can see it on the website, we can see people who might move around the website and go to the Helpline or web chat pages afterwards, but it's really hard to say. I would imagine, I guess you're kind of preempting the idea that people are going for help later because they're getting advice from different places now, and that may well be the case. The problem now, and we've talked about the next stage of testing, the next stage is going to be going out into the kind of the world and talking to kind of real people, which sounds very daunting. But yeah, that's one of the things we need to answer. Where are people now entering into the ecosystem when they need that kind of help? We're going to have to monitor the pages very carefully in terms of looking, is there actually a drop-in advice or drop-in users for those pages that aren't emergency situations? So
I think generally it's understood that people come really close to disaster.
Yep.
Do you know, like there's a sort of like ignoring it first, which is totally understandable. But certainly our lawyers say about things like mortgage repossession, repossession for rent arrears, that sort of thing, tends to be close to the end. Yeah.
Right, that's all we've got time for at the moment. Thank you very much.